4, 3, 2, 1. Off Exchange Podcast. I have my amazing friend with me here, Moose. And thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Do you like The Office? Well, you've been here before, though.
I love The Office. No, okay, so it actually looks different on your podcast and, like, in your photos than it does in person.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know, because, like, I think, like, after being here and, like, having some fun memories and stuff here, I was like, yeah, I see why this is a special place.
Yeah. It's a special place, number one, because, like, the things that happen here, but the amount of work that I put into it to get it to be here. And not only me, like, my friends, Elijah helped out, everyone that was there with, like, the soundproofing stuff and the couches and, like, the table and putting together. Like, all of this wasn't here. Like, I bought all this. My brother used to be in this room, and he moved out. So, like, I was working at Five Guys and stuff. So I was like, I want to take over that room. So I used my money that I was making at the time, and then I, like, put it together, and then it just ended up being this. And then I went to the mall once, saw a beanie bag, and I'm like, or a bean bag. Sorry, everyone corrects me. It's a bean bag.
You call it a beanie bag?
It's a beanie bag.
That's so funny.
It's a beanie bag. That's what I think. Whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So everyone, like, is like, oh, it's a bean bag. It's a bean bag. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I went to the mall, got the beanie bag. It's green. So I was like, all right, I'm getting the green one. I have to. That's my favorite color. And then I liked it because it's different. The beanie bag in particular. Everything else is gray and black. Oh, and then it's just green.
Yeah, I remember when you first told me about it. You called it your office. I was like, you mean your man cave?
It would be a man cave, but there's a lot of women. Okay. Wait, that sounded sounded horrible.
Yeah. I know what you mean, don't worry. I don't know if your viewers know, though.
Okay, that's not what I meant. There are women come in here to hang out and friends and stuff. Besides So I wanted you on the podcast specifically because I think your point of views are very interesting, and I like to have different guests on the podcast for the way they think, anything, the way they talk, their hobbies, and one thing that you wanted to speak about was the government shutdown that we're currently in 20. Yeah. Today is the
27th day, I think.
27th day, but it's the 16th of January 2019 or 17th of January?
The 17th.
Okay, so it's the 17th of January in 2019. Today is a Thursday, and the government has been shut down for 27 days.
It might be a little bit more. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay,
but like, it's been the longest government shutdown in history, which is, like, the biggest kind of like slap in the face, I think, about this. And also on top of that, there's been a lot of talk about how the workers, because that's rounding about a month, so that means like the workers who would have gotten paid with the, like, because it's only a partial shutdown, so the workers who would have gotten paid with that money that the government uses to keep open when they're funded, there's talk about them not being paid for this month's of work. Yeah. So that's also, like, infuriating.
Yeah, of course.
It sounds like, I try not to, when I talk about these things, I try to not, like, reflect rage, because I know that that's not, like, the way that we should approach these topics a lot of the time, because then it's hard for people to kind of understand and empathize with you. But it is like, infuriating is the right term when it comes to people who are directly affected by that, who are not getting paid for their past months of volunteer work. Yeah. So, the government shutdown has been, like, I think every single day, just the fact that it's the longest is a big deal, but also every single day it seems to be, like, progressing to nowhere.
Yeah, and I was going to say there's a lot of issues, obviously, with the government shutdown, but one of the bigger issues is mind-blowing, is, like, the reason why it's shut down, right, with the debate between, like, the wall and the not wall, right? And then the reason for the wall is to keep, they say the reason for the wall is to keep crime out of the country and drugs, and but now that TSA isn't getting paid, right, like, it's like drugs can be brought in through the airports.
Ironic,
it's like, what is the, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we doing? Like, there's no answer to the government being shut down. Like, no one's winning at this point. Nobody. Yeah. Like, the civilians aren't winning. The politicians aren't winning. The president's not winning.
There's actually, I don't quite know what country, but I know that somebody was able to go through TSA with a gun.
Yeah,
and
I saw that.
and like
I
I'm
heard
not
about that.
shocked at all. Like, you know, I talked to my sister about this, and if, you know, we're talking about national security being the reason why we're shutting down the government, we're not doing a good job. Like, that's literally it. Like, you know, like, we laugh, but, like, that's just,
what else,
it's just,
like,
yeah. And the other day, you know, you actually picked me up from the airport, and while I was waiting for you, I saw a whole bunch of TSA agents, and I was like, oh, shit, like, I forgot that, you know, they were there all by volunteer, and that was maybe, you know, it was, like, roughly a week ago. But still, there was, you know, JFK is the biggest airport in New York City. Yeah. It's an international airport. There's a lot of threats and stuff, that potential threats that can you know, be intercepted there. And so, especially with like New York City's history with like airplanes and like 9/11, et cetera, like that should be our top priority. I actually haven't looked into this, but there might be some way that like the city or the state can get involved with that kind of security, because, you know, if we're really talking about like border security or just like national security, we shouldn't really be worrying about the wall. And I remember I was watching President Trump's address about the wall. It was about like 2 weeks ago, I believe, or like you know, it was actually last week, and he was just talking to the American people about the wall, and in a way he was also giving like a message to the Democrats about spending and how they need to decide on a bill that allocates money for the wall. And he said something along the lines of because of like Democratic opposition, we are going to make it a steel fence instead of a wall, as if if that's anything better. Like we're going to make it a steel barrier instead of a wall. And I was just like blown away because this man, like, he it was almost like it was hard for him to get to that point, whereas like Democrats are in the stance of like, we want no wall at all because it's a waste of money. Like we don't want a steel fence either. And I remember they had like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer actually speak about, like, respond to his message, and they were like, we don't want a steel wall, like, you need to open up the government. And the public reception after these two statements was that, wow, that was kind of useless, like nothing came out of that. And it's just so disappointing. Like, you're 100% right when you say that nobody's winning from it, because it's just a futile cause. Like, there's been a lot of issues since Trump's presidency in terms of like healthcare, in terms of documented students and residents, and in terms of like, you know, the Muslim ban. Like, there's just been so much controversial stuff, and the Democrats were kind of forced to, you know, give away a little bit with all of those. So like with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, it's the same thing. A lot of people don't know that it's the same thing. Democrats kind of, well, it was actually most recently, the status on that is that a judge, I forget if I think it was a federal district court judge, ruled it as unconstitutional for some of like its provisions. So
the Affordable Care Act? Yeah.
So I don't quite know which provision, but I think it was like just this idea that that like citizens had to, because one of the clauses of the Affordable Care Act is that if citizens don't, every single person is obliged to get health care, and if you don't, then you're going to be taxed. So I'm not like 100% sure if that was the thing that they ruled unconstitutional.
Okay, I'm not a politician, right? But and we live in New York City, so I'm part of the inner city, so I can't really speak to like, rural. I can't speak for rural, but I could speak for like people living in an urban community, because that's where we live. Yeah. Majority of people don't think Obamacare was bad. I think majority of people thought Obamacare was overall a decent
in urban areas.
A situation. But if you said the Affordable Care Act is the same thing.
Yeah. So Republicans called the Affordable Care Act Obamacare, so that the rural area, like Southerners and Midwesterners would be opposed to it, because the Affordable Care Act makes you, like, based off of the different provisions, it obliges certain employers who have over like I think 15 employees to give their employers healthcare, and it makes every citizen have healthcare. If you don't, you'll be taxed. So there's also like a portion of our taxes. So like taxes did increase in order to get the Affordable Care Act to come to fruition.
Yeah.
And so so a lot of I mean that might be for a lot of reasons because to Southerners who were opposing Obamacare, a lot of them are on the Affordable Care Act, and it's actually quite funny because I've seen many videos where a lot of these people are like, oh, like I hate Obamacare, but I'm on the Affordable Care Act, and I'm just like,
so yes,
they're the same thing.
Yeah, okay. And is that intertwined with the government shutdown as well?
No, it's actually not. Well, no, it's not. Because that was just like I guess like we got into, the government shutdown. Yeah. I guess I was just trying to say how Democrats, they lost the Affordable Care Act, kind of, well, they didn't really lose it. It was there. That is like a whole other long story. But when we're going back to the national security, conversation about the government shutting down, I think what blows my mind or something that makes me hopeful is that now that the Democrats have control over the House, Nancy Pelosi, I actually was reading it this morning, Nancy Pelosi wrote a letter to President Trump saying that you should either not deliver the State of the Union, which is supposed to happen on the 20th, I believe, of this month. It's supposed to happen sometime soon in January. Or you should deliver your State of the Union as a written statement. And the reason why she said that, and the reason why I think that's so revolutionary, which we couldn't do for these past 2 years when the Republicans had control over the House, is because she, as the Speaker of the House, would be introducing the president, and her saying that is her saying, I'm not going to introduce you for this speech, so therefore you probably shouldn't give it, because unless the government reopens, I won't introduce you. And it's kind of like a big,
that's
it's
like a boss move right there.
Yeah, I know. I'm really happy about that.
Let's backtrack for people who don't know, who aren't into politics, who aren't in the field. What is this State of the Union? Like, what is that?
Yeah, so the State of the Union is just like the president's, after like every single year, the president around January 20th, I believe it's January 20th, not 100% sure, but sometime at the end of January, he gives a speech that's like televised all over the country, about, how, like what condition the country is in at the moment, and what his future initiatives are, and like what he kind of needs from the people. So it's just kind of to like check in and be like, hey, like as president of the country, this is what's going on, these are my goals, these are my plans.
And that happens often or no?
That happens annually, every year.
Okay. So once every year.
Yeah. So I remember it's kind of like a long speech and stuff, but the significance behind Nancy Pelosi saying, no, like I'm not even going, like, because to be fair, like she has a point. If the government is shut down, should you even be like checking in with the people? Because you are as the president, you are like the figurehead of the government, right? And so the government shut down. So
what does there to speak to about? Right? Like,
like where are we gonna hold it? Like like we mentioned before, it's a partial shutdown, but speaking of partial shutdown, if you look at the allocations of what has been funded, it's all defense spending. So it's kind of strange. It's really strange.
So, and probably should say this at first, but like we understand that the government is shut down, and I think majority of people know it's because like the wall. It's like the main conversation, right? But like, why is it shut down? Like why like what does that even mean? Like for the people who don't know. And I'm sorry that we're saying it like 15 minutes in, but, we just kind of got off a rant. Like, why is it shut down? Like, what is going on? And
okay. So the Congress is the body that the House of Representatives specifically, because Congress has two branches. They do all of the spending. So all of our tax dollars, they take it and they decide how they want to spend it. And so every single year, in order for the government to run, we pay taxes for them to run.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of and the government is huge. There are multiple government agencies. There's defense spending, there's healthcare, there's education. There's just so much that makes the government run. And so every year we call them appropriation bills. The Congress, they make these bills about how the tax dollars are going to be spent. And there's been, this was actually, if you think back at it, this was kind of inevitable because so the appropriations bills are basically like spending bills. How are we going to spend the money we have? And so Congress has been sending President Trump these bills, and they haven't been including money for the wall in the bills. So now, yeah, and so for majority of last year, actually, we were approaching a government shutdown, but it just finally happened in December. But basically, the reason why it didn't shut down was because Congress was, we were meeting the deadlines. They were meeting the deadlines, but the president wouldn't sign off on it by his proper deadlines. So the government should have shut down when they didn't meet those deadlines. But the reason why things kept going was because they signed short-term bills that would keep the government open until the longer-term spending was decided on. And so this time around, President Trump was basically like, no, I'm not going to sign this. And there, that video that keeps going around about the president asserting, like, I will shut down the government if it's for the wall. Like, I'll proudly do it because it's a national security matter, et cetera, et cetera. Those aren't verbatim, but that's the gist of it. And so he's, he knows what he's doing. And this is kind of like his, foot on the ground kind of thing. And they actually tried their very best to like sign a bill, like a long-term bill that had money for the wall in it before the Democrats were inaugurated into the House of Representatives. But now that they're in, like, there's just no way and there's actually a term for this. There's just no way for the president to get what he wants, really, which is funding for the wall, because the Democrats are very against the wall. And so the term for this is called gridlock. So do you want me to explain what gridlock is?
Yeah.
Gridlock is basically when it's a political party term, and it's a government, and like it's based off of political parties. It's a government term based off of political parties. So basically, gridlock is when there's three branches of government, right?
Yeah.
The executive, which is where the president is, the legislative, which is where the House of Representatives and the Senate is, and then the judicial branch.
Yeah.
And so when the judicial branch, in theory, the Supreme Court should not have any political affiliations, but we know that that's not the case. But gridlock is normally used to describe a relationship between the executive and the legislative, where the executive branch is dominated by one political party, and then the legislative is dominated by the opposing party. And because they have like such differences in views, they can't decide on certain matters, and so the legislation is locked. It's never passed. So it's locked in the process, kind of.
So thank you for educating us on that. But what I keep hearing is, like, the Democrats don't want this, the Republicans want that, the parties keep clashing. It's a gridlock, right? Look at my terms, No, but what? Okay, so like an outsider looking in, I'm more of a individual type of guy, right? Like, I've worked, or interned at least, for the Bronx Offenders. We were doing a lot of bigger issues like close Rikers, and those are political issues, right? Like the bigger, it takes like years and campaigns and protesting, and it's just not for me. I felt like, right? So I've been there, right? But I'm also an outsider looking in because I'm not in there, right? I was there for a little short amount of time doing what I had to do, and I realized that it wasn't for me, right? So like, me as a person, I'm an individual type of person. So like, if you're feeling down, I will pick you up so you could go do those things, right? Like that's just the role I play in people's lives, right?
Yeah, I'm a living witness.
and I understand that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting here like, saying I know everything about politics, but I'm going to ask the questions that I think outsiders looking in feel,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like a question that I have is, all right, the government shut down, and yes, you don't agree with the parties don't agree, but what the hell are we doing to find a middle ground? Because it's not like we can't just sit here. Honestly, we can't just sit here and be like the Republicans are wrong for what they want, and we're just gonna keep it shut down for that. Like, there's still people not getting paid. There's still individuals having issues in their households because they're not getting money. There's still people struggling to get jobs. Like, there are other answers that need to be had, and we're sitting here, and this is just how I feel. Like I said, I work in the cities. I'm in New York City. I work in these cities. I know the people. I know like the neighborhoods, and there are people. We need jobs, right? We need other things. We need to figure out the climate. Like there are 100,000 other issues that we need, and we're sitting here for 27 days being shut down about one thing, right? So like as an outsider looking in, like I know it's a huge issue, and I know it's like really broad and it intertwines with a lot of other things, but there's other answers we need, right? So what I'm trying to say, long story short, is like, as an outsider looking in, what are the parties doing to find a middle ground so our other issues can be talked about?
Yeah, so...
Like, I'm asking you. You may not have the answer, right? But I'm asking you because you would know more than I will. You would know more than maybe somebody listening, So it's like...
So from what I do know, I don't really think that there is much compromise going on, which is what the whole like definition of gridlock is. It's like these two parties are so absorbed in their own views that they can't come together and compromise on something, and they can't come together and like be productive, and that's like really necessary to get the government running. And so even if the government reopens, if President Trump if President Trump keeps trying to push his agenda, he's going to find a lot of difficulty within the House. So this isn't going to be the end of it. And I think that it goes to show like a bigger issue that we're having in our country. So this isn't the first sign of how politicized we are right now. During President Trump's election, we saw a lot of that. We see people in the cities being on the far left most of the time. At least like in New York City, I mostly only know liberal people. And then we see people in like the Midwest and the South on the extreme right. And the reason why is because we, obviously like not all people. I'm not trying to generalize all people, but like the statistics show that like these are the way that we're set up. But the 2016 election actually was so pivotal because it divided the country so much, or not necessarily divided it, but it brought to light and it brought to the human eye how divided we were. And so I actually shared a podcast with you about this same issue, about how we lack empathy for one another, and we lack empathy for our backgrounds. And so, and that's a big part of it. But another part of the podcast that I think is really important to acknowledge is that there is a lot of like technological and societal innovation that has happened in the past 8 years. In the past 10 years, let's put it like that, because when I say 8 years, President Obama's presidency has a lot to do with the reason why we're so divided as well. The fact that we had a black man as our president for the first time, a black man liberal president for the first time, really changed things for our country. And it did make us more politicized. So I think the political... I'm actually not a fan of political parties. It seems like something that we're forced to resort to. And so, that's another conversation. But I think that in terms of compromise, we need to empathize more with one another, because when I'm a city girl. I've always been born and raised in New York City, arguably the best city in the world, right?
I think so.
And so I think so too. And so like when I'm like, when my city has a good government and local government, like, I know my mayor's name, I know my council member, I know my school is pretty decent. I have public transportation to go to school. I don't need a car, and my parents save money from, not having a car necessarily. Like
yeah.
my parents had a car, but what I'm trying to say
Yeah,
is like
yeah. Not
some
having to.
so like my lifestyle is completely different, and so then when I compare it to somebody who was born in Montana and like lived in a rural area, whose family was struggling for whatever reason because like as in the past 10 years the Midwestern jobs have not been as readily available as as like the city jobs have been, and so there's a lot of economic struggle and like forgottenness there that I can't really understand because I'm a city gal. So yeah,
that's another thing that I wanted to actually touch up on, when it comes to I'm like going backwards, but when it comes to like the wall, right? One of my biggest struggles within the city is grasping how hard it is to get a job. Right, because I've talked to people time and time again. I mean, we've had this conversation before. How I'm an accomplished, and I'm saying that confidently, an accomplished college student, right, with a really extensive resume and a lot of opportunities. And I just, I know I'm accomplished in comparison to others, yet I can't get a job, right? And a regular job, like I'm talking like a waiter job, like a fast food job. Like I can't understand it, but it's really hard to like digest that me, who I am, can't get a job when I know a ton of people who don't even have near as much experience as I do and doing as many things as I do. And it's like, with this wall, right, why can't we take a different approach, right? And this may be completely out of the ordinary and ridiculous, or maybe it's common, I just don't know about it. So the issue is like Homeland Security on like a broader like basis, right? Like just very bland, just say Homeland Security, border patrol or control, whatever, right? Why don't we, there's a lot of money being pumped into this to create this wall, and a lot of money being spent to keep the government shut down, right? With all this money and all these resources that we have, there's no way we could open more job opportunities to like figure out other ways to have this border patrol, right? Like, so, for example, there's the wall, right? We put a lot of money into it. We build it, right? The wall's there. The only people who are working with people building the wall, right? What if all that money that we have putting into that, we create more opportunities in those job places, like in Homeland Security? Like why don't we have an influx of 100 more officers and just have them work at the borders more, or like little things, or like maybe like new offices,
so
like why don't we create other jobs or more opportunities for our people that can control the border or Homeland Security of this country, so more people are working, more people are making money, the economy is better, and there's no wall in the middle of the earth, right? Like no, but like to me it sounds possible.
So I think with alternatives to the wall, so the Congress did propose an alternative to the wall, and it was a spending bill. It didn't include spending for the wall, but it included funding for ICE. Now, it didn't get passed quite clearly, like the president didn't sign off on it, but that, the thing is, like, so there's this whole idea that illegal immigration is just like a problem, right? And so this whole idea that illegal immigration is a problem and that it's like plaguing our country with criminals and drugs, right? Like this is the addiction that they put around it. And so I think that it's not necessarily the fact that Homeland Security and stuff isn't funded enough, because like I mentioned, actually, I don't know if they were affected by the shutdown necessarily, but I think like they are funded a lot. We spend a lot of money on defense and stuff. Like I think about 1/5 of all taxes paid by the United States residents are on defense spending. Now that might be like actual troop spending and not necessarily
it's
Homeland Security. But yeah, like the thing is concept. Like, we have this like you have a good point. You have a good point that we should probably take the money and try to find like a more creative or alternative solution to patrol our borders, since that's what seems to be the most important thing to the president. But it's actually not.
And I was gonna say, let's just say, like, whether you agree with it or not, like, that is why the government shuts. That's why I'm saying that. Like, although it's, you know, I may not personally agree with everything that's going on, but since that's the issue at hand, and it seems to be like the biggest debate in the freaking world, let's figure out a solution for that.
But
right? Like,
the thing is, like, the lack of a solution, like, the reason why we're just so perplexed that there is no solution is because it shows that the real problem isn't border security, but it's this like ethnocentric propaganda and agenda that this president wants to put forward. You know, it's this idea, like, it's dehumanizing, and it's to paint those who are crossing the border in a certain way. And, you know, you and I know that that's not necessarily true. People are just looking for better lives.
I was gonna say, okay, so how about this? We don't put money into Homeland Security, for example. Like, this is just another example. It just came to my mind. All right, we don't put money into Homeland Security. Why don't we create a new job that works with these individuals coming across the border that helps them become citizens? Like, why don't we do other things? Exactly. Like, why don't we, you know, put money, all right, maybe not into Homeland Security or defense in itself, like, but why don't we take that money and put it into, like, a new, be like, okay, this is a new branch of defense, and that branch of defense is helping these people coming from these other countries, and, you know,
because a lot of the time they're escaping violence.
There's a lot of reasons why people are crossing the border. It's not just because they want to do drugs or infest the freaking country with a bunch of shenanigans, you know, like. And and another thing is, like, we have our own issues with, like, our inner cities, and, you know, that's what I speak to. I speak to our inner cities because that's where I am, right? We have our own issues with violence and you know, and drugs and all these things, and, like, it's not only the borders too, you know, like, there's so many things going on, and it's just, like, so overwhelming and so, like, sad to think about, and it's even worse. There seems to be no solution from the government standpoint. Like,
I actually have, like, two more things before we end to say.
Of
but
course,
it's so interesting that you bring that up, because, you know, this whole, like, you know, when over the summer when we had this entire debacle about how the government was caging children, basically, who were trying to cross the border with their family. That was freaking awful.
It still goes on, though. It's not like.
It was awful, and that was because a lot of people who were crossing the border, like, they're coming from places that, like, they're going through a lot. They undergo a lot of violence where they come from. There's, like, a lot of, like, gang violence that is, like, tearing apart families. Like, the government does not, like, provide social services for them to, like, even sustain a family. Like, there's a lot of issues that they go through, and so when you pick yourself up from where you're living to go trek yourself, like, by foot for most of the time, maybe you have a vehicle, like occasionally, but when you're doing that, like, you don't do that because you want to bring drugs into another country most of the time. You're most likely doing that because you're scared shitless and you want a better life for your kid and yourself. And so people were bringing their kids on these, like, dangerous, actually, escape routes to the border and trying to cross over and seek asylum. And so asylum is sometimes that alternative to, or, like, that pathway to legal immigration, right? And so asylum is basically, like, you going to a country's government being like, I'm escaping, like, violence or from, like, this country, which is why I need citizenship in your country, because it's unsafe for my life if I go back to that country. And so that's a good question. Why don't we just make more room in our asylum categories and stuff? And the thing is, there's a lot of the people, I don't have, like, exact statistics or anything, but a lot of the people who take those asylum spots are actually it's not actually granted to a lot of Latinx or, like, Central American people. It's given to, like, people coming over from Europe. And so this is, like, what I'm going back to, this, like, ethnocentric, like, agenda that, like, these people coming from Central, Latin, South America up to, I think it's Central and Latin America mostly, but, like, these people coming to the border are, like, you know, I don't even want to say it because the president's diction is just so gross, but, like, criminals, drug hoarders. And so I agree with you. We should, but the thing is, it really does always go back to this, like,
or illegal.
it goes back to, yeah, oh my gosh, even that word is
Yeah,
like
it's
chilling now.
yeah.
But it goes back to this like this image he wants to paint of
Mhm.
these people. And so
And another thing that should be said, I'm sorry, I don't cut
no
you off,
worries,
but
no
like
worries.
it's not only him too. It's like there are people who believe in
Yeah.
these things in our country, and like that's
Yeah.
another goes back to the whole Republicans and Democrats is like literally when I look at the government right now is how I look at our
Mhm.
society in our country. It's just
Yeah.
like separated, like just no answer.
Turmoil.
It's just
Yeah.
it's just a complete mess.
Yeah.
But anyway, you were saying?
But yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge your second point about the inner city struggles, or like even just like the rural area struggles, right? Like it's like there's so much going on inside of our country that's fucked, like
Mhm.
as for lack of a better term, that's just concerning and really scary. So a lot of the terrorism that happens is within our country
Yeah,
with
of
gun
course.
violence. And so whether or not, however you feel about the Second Amendment, you need to acknowledge the fact that people are getting guns and people are shooting up places of
Yeah.
worship, schools,
Yeah.
stores, movie theaters, places of large gathering, and that is terrorizing in itself. The definition of terrorism is to incite fear
Yeah, but
in large groups of people.
I was gonna say when I think it was about a year ago. I was
Mhm.
taking a policing class course at my college,
Mhm.
and
Our college.
our
We don't own
college,
John Jay.
and then that was one of the debates. Was like,
Yeah.
why aren't we calling we're calling some people terrorists and
Mhm.
others just like a mass murder or other words for it.
Or like lone wolf.
Yeah,
gun.
like, and it's like, it's so frustrating because some people they're like, and for some, debates it's fine, but for like something like this, it's just so mind blowing to me. Is like since it's in the dictionary that it has a political context
Yeah.
behind it. That's what makes it terrorism, not the
Yeah.
fact that it was a like a
Like a person.
like that it was. No, okay. So let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
So because it's a political, in the dictionary, it has to have a political agenda behind it to be a terrorist attack, even though it was like a terror.
Yeah.
Among
I feel
us,
the definition of terrorism has definitely changed to a degree, but like at its root,
yeah, and then that's the argument.
Fear.
That's the argument people will take is that it has to have a political agenda behind it, and I just to me it's like no, that guy in Vegas, he was a fucking terrorist, dude. He killed literally.
There might not be like the advancement of a political agenda, but it's totally political. Like the fact that he got a gun, the fact that he can do that and like not be profiled or anything, that's political, like
it's ridiculous.
The fact that he's portrayed as like a lone wolf after that, or like like a good kid just got down the wrong path,
right.
that's also like I think
okay,
like everything connects to politics in a
maybe
way,
that's
yeah.
true what you just said, but why don't we use that for every single person that does something wrong? It's like for this one individual, for that one individual. It comes down to like equality just not being equality, right? It's just no, we're not equal in the eyes of hundreds of people, unfortunately. And like I said, it's not. And what we have to like remember is it's not one person. Like it's not just him, bro. There's a lot of people who think like that, and it's like sad, but it's true. Like it's kind of like we have to just keep fighting it, right? Because if that's how you feel, then that's how you feel. But I'm going to challenge your points of views always, right?
Yeah, I think that people have this idea that just because like slavery ended, where everyone's equal, like, and like a lot of people still hold that old idea, and like we know that's not true. Like women got the right to vote years after in the 1920s, like way after Native Americans got the right to vote in the 1960s.
Right.
Like people, we're not equal at all, and like right now we see the same thing with like people who are in prison. They don't have a lot of them. It depends on your state. A lot of them, when they leave prison or even while they're in prison, can't vote. I think only 4 states allow their imprisoned and incarcerated to vote.
Right.
So it's equality is a big issue.
I want to go back to like what I was saying earlier, right? About like no jobs, right? Some people are gonna watch this. They're gonna listen to this. They're gonna be like, "Dude, this guy's ridiculous. His point of views are insane. There's no way that could work." But I think it can, right? Now, the reason why I say I think it can is because it's not going to be easy, but we have to change the way that it's structured. Everything. I'm not saying, like, right away just give the whole world a job, right? But if the way we distributed our money was different, there would be more opportunities for people, right? The fact that one person there's one person in the world makes up like 500,000 others. Like like one individual equals 500,000 other people's income in the country of like the bottom 1%, the top 1%. It's like, bro, literally, if you look at a scale, it's literally like this, like probably even worse, you know. And that's what I mean by that. Is like we can create these jobs if we take the steps to create them. You know, I'm not just saying like, you know, don't build the wall. Now all of a sudden like 30,000 people have jobs. You know, if we don't build the wall, we hire these people. Now these people have jobs. Now what do we do? Now we take the next step of like trying to fix the distribution of the money, and then eventually, you know, obviously it's never going to be like perfect, right? But it's so bad that it needs to be fixed to a certain extent. Yeah. You know, and if you don't believe it could be fixed, then you know. Yeah,
I mean, like, wealth inequality is a huge issue, like you said. Like, that gap between the top 1% and everyone else gets bigger and bigger every day. The top 1% has about 40% of the world's wealth. Yeah. Like, it's frightening, and it's getting worse. And so there's no reason why, you know, regardless of what you believe, a CEO of a company should make a lot of money. Yeah, but there's no reason why he should have 40% more than like 500,000 other people, or like, you know, like that's just kind of nuts in my humble opinion. And so it, you know, it goes down. It's so like all of these issues are just so
another thing is like I was thinking about that too. So like let's say you're a CEO of a company, right? And you know the CEO does a lot of work. They you know, they created this. They did what they did. That's why they're at the top, right? But like let's say the COO, right? Which is under the CEO. Yeah. They do a lot of work as well. But imagine the money was distributed a different way to where the COO didn't have to do as much work, and there was another job for someone else to do, and then another job for someone else to do. So like it's not just, if you look at companies nowadays, it's CEO, and then
it's like hierarchical.
Yeah, it's like this, right? What if it instead of like, you know, the pyramid, like, you know, the whole pyramid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What if it was like a little thing at the top, which is CEO, and then CEO, and then like, so like everybody, like there's all these jobs, right? And then all these people make money, and then at least everyone's living and could afford and live their own different lives, but they could actually live. And people are going to watch this and be like, yo, this dude is insane. There's no way that's possible. But I believe that can happen. It's just we have to push for it. Bro, tell Martin Luther King Jr., you know, God rest his soul, tell him he couldn't do what he did, right? tell Rosa Parks she couldn't do what she, like, it's, like, I when people tell me, like, it's not possible, or I can't do it, or, like, it's impossible, it's like, dude, I think about these people who have overcome so many things, and we're talking about them, and they're known. You know how many people did so many things behind them that we don't even know their names? Yeah. You know, like, these changes came from somewhere, right? Yeah. So I think
that's the thing. Like every revolutionary thing that you and I like the whole world looks at and we're like, wow, that person really cultivated like change for the better. It was viewed as like a radical thing at one point, and this too is actually a really it's a really radical point of view, because you know you're trying to dismantle this like economic system of capitalism that we've had for so long, and so. It is radical, and I do think it's possible. I agree with you. I think it's possible, but I think this is just the beginning. Like, I think I actually don't even know if we'll see any change in our lifetimes, or like the change that we want. But I think that, you know, the fact that like you and I can't find jobs, and we're like college students that are just trying to like work at the CVS and like part time, like that goes to show that there is an issue. You know, that like. If we're just like struggling to live and we live with our families, that there is an issue, like, and so I think like there's gonna be slowly but surely, like there already is at the local levels, more of a push to be more equitable, and like, you know, the minimum wage just went up in New York, and so I think like there's a push to, you know, stop this hyper capitalist mentality where like you work hard, you made it to the top as a CEO, but most of the time that's really not what happens. You know, like CEOs are kind of like, they have like a birthright a lot of the time, or like they have some connection, and like, and like they have social capital, which like other people might not have. They have social capital and economic capital, and that makes them a lot more powerful. So it's all about power. Like I mentioned before, these are such like entangled and layered issues. But I agree with you. I think that you know, this might be radical to some people watching. This might be radical to some people, and like in general. But like it's not impossible. And in fact, if we need to have that hope, because if we don't, then it might never happen. And so we need to hold on to that. So I respect it, and I agree with you, because every single, you know, like I mentioned before, every single revolutionary idea was once really radical. It was like no way, like like integrated schools, what? Like exactly. Like that was the mentality for a long time, and even like shortly before we were born, like it was still a new thing, you know?
Right. And
so
I mean, whatever. That was a good conversation, though.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, we said we were going to do 30 minutes, and it's 45, you know.
Yeah.
But thank you for stopping by, Moose. I appreciate it. All the content can be found on AnneJLeonardo.com. If you have any questions, comments, definitely Moose's Instagram will be in the description, and it was on the screen earlier. You could always, you know, contact me and go out and vote. You know, get involved. And if you're not a politician, that's fine.
You don't have to be.
I'm not a politician, but just get involved in the community. Get to know your people. You'll learn a lot from it. I promise.
before we end, I just want to say you don't need to be a politician to be involved or to know your rights, like, and to know that you can vote. Like, those are all things that you can, because like you were mentioning, you're a very individual person. You don't need to go out and protest to be a good citizen or person or involved. Like, you can do so many other things, like, you know, go to your local gym, like like that in itself, like, you'll learn so much about where you are and how things work, and you'll learn about it in a way where you connect with it, and that's what's important.
And there's nothing wrong with being different and then making a change. You know, don't be afraid. Just because people think one way around you doesn't mean, you know, it's wrong to think the way you think.
I agree. But talk about it.
Yeah,
that's
definitely. Express
what brings productivity.
Yeah, so, like let's, you know, at the end of the day, if you could take anything out of this episode, you know, since we're in this, what's it called? Gridlock. Right? We're in this gridlock because we don't have these conversations. And one of the reasons for having this podcast, and I think one of my, literally, I was put on this earth was to talk to people. So, talk to people.
I second that
statement. just go have the conversations, all right?
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll grow from it. Hopefully the person you're talking to will grow from it as well. But like I said, thank you, Moose, for stopping by. Hopefully we'll have you on a future episode, maybe when the government comes back on, or you know, to talk about other issues. But I appreciate you coming on, and
thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Go do yoga. Yoga's fun.
I hope you all enjoy this podcast.
Yoga's fun. We do yoga together.
Yeah. We're about to go right now.
All right. See you later. Thank you.
Bye.